So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, from whichever part of the world you're dialing in. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar that we're holding. We are very excited to share with you some more news. Some of you may have recalled that in December last year, we had a quick outlook webinar at the end of the year to look at projects that the COP is planning to engage in 2025. It's already April, but we are now engaging in those projects. And myself, together with Stuart, Valentina, and Sebastian, are happy to take you through those projects and give you a bit of a taster for today. I'll share with you my screen. And what we have in mind for you today is I just want to do a quick recap of what the COP is trying to do and why we are engaging in those projects. Only very, very brief recap. And then we want to spend one part of the call today on introducing the projects and the people involved, and to give you an idea exactly what we're talking about and to see how things developed since our conversations in December. Then we would want to do a breakout session with you to make this whole thing a bit more interactive and do some brainstorming where we kind of collect further ideas, and we have a few questions for each of the projects developed to get your input and to get us on the right track when we're actually starting those projects. And then at the very end, just a quick outlook in how people can engage, other webinars that we have planned, and other ways of engagement. That's kind of what we had in mind. And to get us straight into it, I'm just going to provide a quick background on what the COP Indigenous EH project is doing. We are part of the Conservation Coaches Network, CCNet. We are a thematic network. That means we are capturing globally everything. We're not regionally restricted, focused on applying the conservation standards with Indigenous people and local communities. On our call, we have already a few of our wonderful coordinating committee members. I see I may miss some of you if you are hiding in my list of all people subscribed, but I saw that Marina was here. Marina and Melanie together are based in the north of America, in Canada. And yeah, they're representing that part of the world. We have Gustavo, who is now visible, and Valentina, who are representing Latin and Central America. I don't think on the call, because it is in the middle of the night, are Anne and Martin, who are our representatives from Africa. We have two representatives from Asia, Lavanita and Natalino. And then from Australia, also two representatives, Daniel and Joanne. And while I'm not a coordinating committee member, I guess I'm coordinating the committee. And myself, I'm based in Melbourne, in the very south. And yeah, so that's us, that's the COP. And as the COP, we've been engaging for a few years now in different projects. And our main goal really is we want to increase access and support for Indigenous people and local communities in using and adapting the conservation standards. A lot of that is driven by the learnings that we had, and I'm very happy to have Stuart on board, that we had with the journey with Stuart in Australia around healthy country planning and how that all evolved and developed. And so based on this kind of a regionally initiative, we kind of brought the topic and the focus onto the global stage when we started the COP. And our mission, I guess, is we want effective conservation, but we want effective conservation, support and effective conservation that is led by indigenous people and local communities. And we want to ensure that the conservation standards contribute and the adaptations to better environmental, cultural, and social outcomes, to ensure that we're not sidelining by any way indigenous people and local communities through our conservation effort. We developed a strategic plan we developed it 2 years ago, we launched it last year. And as it is with CCNet, each strategic plan for each of our networks has different priorities and goals that are similar across all the branches. And there are two that are really relevant that drove us why we decided those two projects that offered themselves towards the end of last year were worthwhile following through. We have one work program that the Corp is trying to focus on around tool development. So around developing new add-ons to the conservation standards or other ways that help facilitate the conservation standards with IPLC in a more meaningful way. And since we are CCNet or part of CCNet, one major aspect is around training and providing people with those skills and coach people and so forth. And out of those two major work programs, there are those highlighted activities that in particular relate to those two projects because they are about developing tools, they are about providing training in some form and shape in those tools, and I guess all aiming at building capacity across indigenous people and local communities, and with those working with indigenous people and local communities. That's been pretty much the key driver for us, why we thought when we heard, hey, there are two opportunities to develop tools and to develop training materials, that we should sink our teeth into this project. And with that, I want to introduce who the core team is and what those projects are, because that would be very helpful, I'd say, for people. I mentioned already my name before. My name is Frank Weisenberger, based in Melbourne in Australia. Been working with the Community of Practice Indigenous Conservation Standards project since the beginning. And so I am a part of the core team, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague and COP coordinating member, Valentina.
Thank you, Frank. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to see you all today. Thank you for joining us. So my name is Valentina. I'm Colombian. I'm based in Bogota. And as Frank said, I serve in the steering committee of Community of Practice for Indigenous and Indigenous-led conservation projects, representing Latin America. Also, I had experience on community work, all the management and territorial planning in indigenous territories, also Afro-descendant communities and local territories. Also, I'm related in promotion of dialogue and conflict resolution, and I'm so excited to be part of this webinar with you to learn all together and to hear all the insights that we have in conservation planning that we all can share. So thank you so much for joining us. So I can pass the word to Stuart.
Your mic, Stuart.
You're muted.
That's when I do my best work. So if everybody's happy with what I just said, that'd be great. Now we can move on. So yeah, I know quite a few of you. Hi to those that I don't. I'm Stuart Cowell. Currently, I live in Nipaluna on Lutruwita, or Hobart in Tasmania, in Australia, for those of you that know where that is. I'm part of conservation, small consultancy, social enterprise conservation management. although we're in the process of not being that anymore and shifting across to a not-for-profit to better pursue some of these sorts of things. And yeah, we've been working with Indigenous peoples and local communities pretty much throughout the entirety of conservation management, and yeah, looking forward to this work. I think it'll be really useful. I'm looking forward to the sessions that coming up as we do the work and drawing from the knowledge around the room and around the world. As part of the conservation management team, we also have Saras Kumar that some of you may have already met. I'll hand over to Saras to introduce herself.
Thanks, Stuart. So, hi everyone. Ninamani, which means hello, how are you? Because I'm calling in from the land of the Kaurna people, so that's Adelaide in South Australia, and so work with Stuart at Conservation Management, and one of the co-coordinators for the CCNet Australia Aotearoa network as well. So, but on this project, done a little bit of work with Sebastian and Valentina, and really, more of a supporting role, so do similar things to Stuart generally, and a lot of healthy country planning, particularly obviously in Australia. I'll hand back.
Good. Thank you, Sarah. And we're really happy to have this bunch of people together, because I guess all over the past, well, I'd say for the past 20 years nearly with Stuart, we've been all collaborating, working together on those topics relating to the conservation standards and pushing the envelope further. So I'm really grateful that we were able to get us all together for this project. But this project would not be complete without our project partner. And with that, I would like hand over to Sebastian from the Nature Conservancy.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sebastián Cabrera. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm joining today from Kalimantan. I'm in Borneo. It's really early in the morning. We just passed the first call to prayer, so it's 5 a.m. here. And we're here because we're doing a collaboration also with conservation management and implementing a health country planning training. So it's been quite an exciting week here. Well, I work in the global team of Indigenous and community leadership in conservation in the Nature Conservancy, supporting Indigenous-led conservation projects across the world. And my work focuses on tropical forest ecosystems, although our team also works in grasslands and coastal ecosystems, so quite interesting work. And before we were showing a little bit about the vision of our team. And maybe I just want to highlight one word that I think it's really important, and that also bring us here into this collaboration, is the self-determination. So we feel that there's a really great opportunity of collaboration between the Nature Conservancy, the Indigenous Conservation Standards Community of Practice, CCNet, and any partner that would like to join in to support the Indigenous and local community self-determination. So we can promote a shift to more inclusive and Indigenous-led conservation. So that's why we're here. Can we go to the next, Frank? So this is a brief map to show you where we're currently collaborating with the global ICLC team of TNC, working with culture teams and then Indigenous and local communities. Next one, Frank, please. So if you saw, we have shared goals we're basically working to promote the same principles of how to do conservation. And that's why we got together, started communications with Conservation Management, CCNet, and us to say what can we do. We will be starting really soon a collaboration to create practical guidance and tools that adapt and enhance the conservation standards, basically to promote indigenous and community-led conservation. So we hope to formally start this collaboration soon, although we have been talking already for quite some months. And basically, we'll be developing together tools and guidance that's accessible and simple, and that can support indigenous-led conservation and, at the end, self-determination. So that's for me today. Pleasure to be with you here.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, for that introduction. So Sebastian already touched on one aspect of the two projects, and that's the tools and the technical guidance. We just thought we'd give you a really quick overview of those two things, that we're not losing people in the different projects, because they are very similar and very interconnected, but still distinct to a point. So there is this collaboration that Sebastian was talking about with the COP and with conservation management. And then there is as well what we presented on at the end of last year, a opportunity that offered itself through conservation management and the Center for Wildlife Studies. And that's about looking into developing training materials and a training course to look at the conservation standards through an indigenous lens. There's clearly heaps and heaps of crossover. But those are the two things driving the development of the materials and the provision of the training. As part of the engagement with TNC for this project, there is a principles document that TNC has developed internally that we will be providing input in. The things that Sebastian referred to just now is two tools. They have at the moment, I'd say, clunky titles. We keep them until we determine really what the title should be. But one tool for the purpose of this project focuses on a spectrum of indigenous and community leadership in conservation planning. And we want to brainstorm for that tool today as well. The second tool Sebastian mentioned or referred to is a tool to look and to assess equitable, inclusive, community-led processes in conservation. And there is practical guidance associated with all that to embed those tools, but as well to look at other ways how we can make tools of the conservation standards applicable to foster indigenous leadership in conservation. And then there is, as part of the project with developing the training materials or running the training with the Center for Wildlife Studies, an aspect about the training modules. As you can see from those different outputs, they are kind of in a way sequential. The tools and the resources provide us the foundation to develop the training. The training provides us with an opportunity of rolling out what we develop here to a broader group of people. And with that, I would like to hand over to Stuart, I'd say, to talk a little bit about what a spectrum of indigenous and community leadership and self-determination all is involved in.
Thanks, Frank. And indeed, that's the question that we want to explore as a group today a little bit, is what actually is a spectrum of indigenous and community leadership and self-determination as a tool. What we've been asked to do is to develop something that, if you see those dot points there, that helps communities or teams to conduct an assessment, have a look at what that means, figure out what resources then are available for improvement, and to sort of track actionable steps. Now, there are a number of existing assessment types of frameworks, a bit like this one, the IAP2 spectrum of engagement, which a lot of you may be aware of. You know, spectrums of participation have been around for a very long time, both in broader public participation spaces as well as in the space of working with Indigenous peoples and local communities. What we know of those tools as they exist, though, is that on the whole, they're analytical tools, useful. Oh, I think we're here, or I think we're there, but they don't necessarily provide much in the way of saying, and therefore this needs, you know, we want to be here, and therefore this is what needs to happen to move us, to shift us along the spectrum, to evaluate whether that change is actually happening, you know, what the different elements of that change might need to be. So they're fairly, what I'd call fairly static. Oh, this is we're in a process that's about involve, or we want to do a process that's about collaborate. And we're wanting to be able to figure out how we can take those things and make them much more, firstly, analytical, what's going on here, but secondly, you know, supportive. Well, this is what's going on, but we want it to be like this. How are we going to shift that, and how do we track that shift as we do work? So that's really the focus of this particular aspect, is to be taking a lot of what exists and trying to create something that's functional within the context also of conservation standards. So we, as Frank said, we're having a couple of breakout rooms today, and one of those is just going to be to start exploring a few ideas around this idea of the spectrum. That's all I've got for the moment. Frank, if you want to jump across, I think Valentina's taking the next one.
Terrific. Thanks, Stuart. And to add on what Stuart was saying as well, we have today a first brainstorming, but that is not the end of engagement as well, to ensure this is the kickoff for everything to get us on the right track. We will then later on have more workshops we're going to talk about towards the end of the webinar. And with that, I'll hand over to Valentina.
Thank you, Frank and Stuart. So I'm going to briefly introduce the pre-planning tool. So we're going to give us like a little context to go deeper all together in the breakout rooms, to give us some ideas and to co-building together. So this pre-planning tool we've been working on has the purpose to support all the conservation practitioners in building strong, respectful, and lasting relationships with Indigenous people and local communities throughout all the conservation process. So this should be a guide to fostering all the right relationships with the IPLC, and also to strengthen their leaderships and self-determination, as Sebastian explained us, in conservation process. This tool will include also some suggested steps to the practitioner implementation of equitable, inclusive, and community-led conservation, planning, implementation, and adaptive management. It will be focused mostly in fostering equitable and inclusive engagement and leadership. This means that beyond just inviting the communities to participate, it's also about truly sharing the power, space, and voice from the very beginning. Also, it's key to keep it in mind to respecting and honoring and putting dialogue also with the traditional knowledge systems. We also recognize that Indigenous people and local communities hold deep and place-based knowledge in the essential effective conservation. So this tool will encourage the practitioners to approach this knowledge with openness and humility, and also to support and being true partners in the community-led decision-making, for example. This involves the shifting the mindset from consulting to co-create, making sure that the decisions are grounded in the community's priorities and also their leadership, their own leadership that they already have. And also we are taking into account to ensure meaningful participation in every step. like in each step, as you can say, like in the graph. If we are doing well, if we are thinking about we are doing well and we are in discussion with the communities, maybe we could do it better to have a really and a truly relationship in the conservation process. So we're going to implement all these different tools to emphasize the importance of indigenous and local community leaderships in all across all the stages. So we hope that this tool can help us to just to do more inclusive and effective and justice all the efforts of conservation and building all the relationships in this shared process. So we are looking forward to listen all your thoughts about how we're going to build this pathway together. Thank you, Frank.
Terrific. Thank you, Valentina, for that introduction. And so we heard now of the two tools, and the last breakout session for today, and the other part of the projects that we're doing this year is around developing training materials to look at the conservation standards through an indigenous lens. For those of you who've been part of previous webinars and who went to the December webinar, we've been getting more and more requests from different regions in the world, either for indigenous people or for non-indigenous people, working with indigenous people around training and accessing training resources. Stuart already talked about it as well, and I talked about it many times, is around the concept of regional adaptations. What happened here in Australia with healthy country planning was super successful. And we've seen other similar adaptations pop up in other parts of the world, like healthy territory planning in the area where Valentina is working, the Malama Ikekai work from Hawaii, some of that work happening in the Northwest Territories in Canada, and that Melanie is working on planning for future. So there's a whole heap of kind of regional adaptations happening. Unfortunately, with the resources we have as the COP, we are not really necessarily able to recreate many more regional adaptations. We would love to, but we haven't been successful in that because that requires actually quite significant resourcing that we don't have access to as of yet. So instead of being able, the next best thing after a regional adaptation or supporting the training and resourcing of that is we can develop and look into supporting training and how to adapt the conservation standards so that regions and groups are able to create meaningful adaptations in their little part of the world. That thinking kind of that thinking matured when Stuart connected us to a fella at the Center of Wildlife Studies, Quinn Shertiff, who's part of the CCNet community as well, that many of you, I'm sure, will know. And the Center of Wildlife Studies was interested in looking into a training workshop, to host a training workshop on their platform around conservation standards with indigenous people. And so we used that opportunity as well to take a lot of the learnings that come from the project with TMC and the tools that are developed and the guidance that is developed there, and mash that up into a training course so that we can actually roll that out and it doesn't become something that lives on a shelf. The approach we have in mind is looking at all the existing materials that have already been developed in Latin America, Oceania, North America, and Australia, and combine that one with input from everyone to improve and to create some sort of guidance materials. Only very, very quickly, so that we can actually jump into the breakout rooms. The underlying assumption is we all believe in the concept of adaptive management and the conservation standards, because that's what brings us all together in this space of CCNet. The conservation standards are the common denominator, and the training will reflect those CS steps, the sequencing of it. But that is really what we've learned, the important part from a funder side on the back end of a adaptation. On the front end, it's the regional adaptation. How is that? How does this adaptation look on the ground to the communities you're working with, mapped against the conservation standards in the background? The idea is that all our materials, similar to everything in the conservation standards, are developed under a Creative Commons license. So with the idea that people can walk away, improve, share, modify, change, all those things, so that the materials get applied. That's kind of really in a very short overview, the different projects, the different tools that we are planning to work on this year, but as well part of the session. And as a next step, we wanted to ask you to jump really briefly with us for 15 minutes into one of 3 breakout rooms. And well, everything is in a way on the screen. I will open up those rooms. Maybe Valentina and Stuart, you can say which of the rooms you're guiding and what you're planning to do. And in the meantime, I'll open the rooms. Everyone can assign themselves to whichever room they want to be. And after 15 minutes, we come back here. For the sake of time, Stuart, Valentina, do you want to pick one key thought that you would like to share with the rest of the room from your breakout session?
I got one which I think covers a multitude of sins, but is a really important one, which is, we're dealing with both complex spaces by themselves, sociocultural and biodiversity spaces, and a complex set of interactions. But we need to be able to have tools that people can engage with where that complexity is not a barrier, but be able to draw on that complexity. And so that's a design challenge that we have. You don't want to simplify things so much that you lose any power in it. So we have to figure out a way of having, a sensible level of engagement, but a sensible recognition of the space we work in.
Thanks, Stuart. Valentina?
Yeah, like if I can highlight comment from the or a thought from our group, it's like to have a very basic tool but really useful that also could work like in person, because we have many guidance for like work on online, but also we need in person to have some key steps to go through and be like emphasized to be easy to use, and has enough flexibility to work in different contexts and different communities. So that was one of that. And maybe it could be a checklist, also a decision tree. We have like a brainstorm of ideas there that we have to go deeper. It was a short time.
Sure. Thanks, Valentina. Yeah. 15 minutes when you need to give instructions is definitely not what we can call good engagement or good brainstorming. It's a taster for what's to come. And very briefly, only from our session, we were talking a little bit actually outside the box and talked about the issues of engaging communities in a very structured process and how you engage with them, like whether you throw everything on top of them on the first day and see how people scramble and run away scared, because it is very, very structured, very abstract, and not necessarily relating to always the way how the community is looking, or kind of other ways how you can socialize the concept of the conservation standards in a staggered approach with taking enough time and everything to get people to embrace the framework. We talked equally about the difficulties that young people versus elderly people have sometimes with some of the concept in the conservation standards. For some, it is empowering. For others, it's intimidating. So there was a lot of really good insights from Northern America and from Hawaii on how they were faring so far. I'm fully aware that we are already beyond our originally scheduled time. And because we haven't had enough time in this session to do everything, and we never intended to, we have further pathways for people to become involved. And they consist out of one pathway, I guess, is webinars. We are all in different parts of the world, which means face-to-face work is very limited. But we're proposing to hold in the week towards the end of May, on Wednesday, the 21st, Stuart and Valentina will take a deep dive with you in one session that is solely focused on the two tools, the spectrum tool and the self-determination tool, and the engagement tool. And there is similar for the practical guidance, a webinar the week after. Those ones are tied to our work plan in the TNC project. And we are trying to find a suitable time for that that works for the different geographies, fully understanding that with one session, we cannot get it right for everyone, because there will be always one part of the world that is voluntarily sleeping and at bed. So we're probably thinking about running 2 sessions that allow us to get the feedback from people in different time zones. And those webinars, and please, Stuart and Valentina, at any point jump in. We will advertise those webinars again through the listservs, through our LinkedIn. We have on our homepage as well a specific space now for all this to keep you involved. And everybody that subscribed to this webinar, that participated in the sessions with Sarah, Sebastian, and Valentina at the CCNet rally in Chile, or that have given previously in December already their contact details because they want to be involved in those projects, we'll send you specifically as well invitations when we already know who you are. Oops, sorry. And then towards between June and August, we will explore further a series of webinars for the training material development. We are not sure, and we will get back to you about that and maybe do some additional voting. I don't think we will be able to run a webinar for each step of the conservation standards. That is bigger what we can achieve in the time we have. But we want to at least focus on those and run online sessions on those that are really key. That is one aspect of getting in touch, webinars and participating in workshops. And the other part is by helping us to review outputs, the things that come out at the end of our collaboration. We're trying to get as many diverse opinions already in the room by developing the tools, but we always need to accept that we're looking at things from our little space that we inhabit. So this means we don't necessarily have a really open view on how other people may perceive tools. For that purpose, we are proposing that we can engage up to 4 reviewers from different geographies and contexts and organizations to provide feedback and comment and advice on the project outputs when they are in a draft format, and to give us, I guess, to guide us along the way. For that, the activity will probably happen mostly in August and September. That's when we expect to have something tangible ready that we can show people to provide input on for those reviewers. And we will send out an expression of interest through the COP for people who may think that, that is something we would like to engage in, and we can put the time aside and we want to be part of. So that's, I guess, aside from the webinars, a second pathway of getting engaged and providing input. Anything, Stuart, Valentina, that I've forgotten to mention before I let people go back to their lives?
No, nothing from me, Frank, just other than to ask if anyone has some thoughts after the session, please just send them through. We're wanting to take in as much as we can from the collective experience and knowledge of as many people as possible. So there are those formal points of interaction, but just send stuff, ask stuff anytime.
Yeah, same as Stuart. I mentioned it also in the breakout room. We are open to be in contact with everyone. Please contact us if you have any thoughts that we cannot discuss here. Also, we have another webinars, as Frank said, but we are totally open to receive everything. So thank you. And thank you for your time for today.
Thank you, Valentina. Thank you, Stuart. I put as well our email address into the chat. You can as well get in touch with Valentina and Stuart if you have their contact details directly as well, for sure. And yeah, that's it from our side. And I would like to say as well, big thank you to Sebastian, who got up really, really early as during his field trip to introduce the project from TNC's point of view. Thank you everyone for your time. As per usual, we will post the recording of the webinar on YouTube for everyone who couldn't join. Don't be a stranger, be in touch, and we will send out everything via email and through our LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye
Good
bye.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you.